I'll be dealing with them in the order that the questions came to me from John. So the first one was Wendell, and like I said, I'll just select one or two from each person. But if there's one you really cared about and want me to address, just raise your hand. Ask me to look at it.
And John, let me interject to say Wendell is in Bon Chasse, Louisiana, right outside New Orleans.
Belchase? Belchase,
right.
Where the military base is? Down in Plaquemines?
Yeah.
Excellent. I spent a lot of time down around Belchase. And not only that, and I'm sorry to mispronounce your name, Wendell. Is it Wendell?
Yeah, it's Wendell.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. All right. It's and there's a Wendell Curol who runs gosh, which parish is it? Lafourche Parish, maybe? Anyway.
Okay.
Not such an unusual name in the great state of Louisiana is all I'm saying. So you asked, was writing what you always wanted to do? And the answer is yes, but I didn't know it, because like a lot of guys, I don't actually know what I want. I only do things according to my urges, right? I mean, it's like I find myself sort of in the middle of something, go, that turns out to be what I wanted to do. I was always writing, like even back in 6th grade, I started a newspaper for my elementary school class, but and then continued to do journalism stuff in high school, and even in college I did some work for the school newspaper, but I never thought I was going to be a journalist until about till I was almost 25 or 26, and I was in law school, and I realized that I was in law classes during the day and didn't feel like I was really in the middle of my people. And then I was at the school newspaper in the evening, late afternoon, early evening, and that felt like home. And so I had to make a choice, and I realized that I was going to try to be a writer, that I could finish law school and continue to try to be a lawyer if that was what was going to work for me, and if writing didn't work, but I wanted to at least try being a writer first. So I always wanted to be. So I was always being a writer, but I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. That might not make sense, but it still makes sense to me. And then you also asked, how's your son doing based on the book? He's great. He's just upstairs. He's taking classes at Fairleigh Dickinson right now, and is double majoring in creative writing because he's a better writer than I am, and creative writing and computer science. And so that all seems to be going pretty well. And thank you for asking. I've got Akua here has asked some questions. And please tell me if I'm mispronouncing your name. I'd hate to do that.
You are.
Damn it.
Don't worry, I did it all the time.
Yeah, but I want to know the right way.
Go ahead, Aquia, tell him. Oops, I gave it away.
It's pronounced Aquia.
Aquia, thank you very much, and I apologize.
There she is, Aquia. See, John, you got to understand, I don't make them turn on their cameras, but I said, listen, John Schwartz is coming. Turn on your cameras for him. So, I made it out like you were like a VIP, so you should feel so honored. Her classmates have never seen her. I've seen her.
I do feel honored, but nobody should feel obligated to turn on a camera for me.
Yes, they should. You. No, not for me. They haven't turned them on all semester. I swear to God.
And yet they can see you.
Oh yeah, I know. It's really unfair.
It's really unfair because they are getting, and I say this with love, the wrong end of this.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So, okay, you said, what did you learn from John Trimble while taking his class? The class was really important. The first thing to understand about John Trimble is that he didn't really like my writing much when I was in the class. I think he thought that I was a little too glib, and I mean, I passed with decent grades, but it was interesting. He wanted to see more out of me, but he really taught me a lot. The first thing was he was asking us to do more writing than any class I had ever taken. And what I discovered was when somebody gives you a deadline, you can meet the deadline. It means more work, but if you've done the preparation, like reading the assigned reading and being ready to write, you can just turn out a paper a week. And I thought that was an unreasonable amount of writing to do at the time, but it got me into the habit of saying, okay, I've got to do this by this time. I'm going to do it. And there are also phrases he used, both in Writing with Style and in the classroom, that were really important to me. I still think about sentences I've written because I write really fast. And a lot of my writing is what he calls automatic writing, that thing where you're just typing to get it done. And and he wants you to go beyond that and re-examine your work after you've written it and look for phrases, passages that are MA, merely adequate. And you'd actually write this in the margin of your paper, M period, A period, merely adequate, which is a terrible thing to see on your paper because it says to you, you really haven't tried as hard as you could. And the sort of guilt that went with that was very, very motivating to me. And I still, after I finished a story, I still go through it and look for places where John would write in MA and tell me that I could be finding something a little more interesting to say this in a little better way, whether that's a phrase at the top of the story, the first thing people read, or just the sort of transition sentences that get you from thought to thought, or a comparison, a metaphor, a simile, more similes in journalism than metaphors, but something that gives you the description you need that helps people understand. A lot of the stuff I write about is technical, and I can write it straight and it'll be deadly dull. But John was really encouraging us to try harder to get things across to people, to push it more. And so that was all, just writing with an eye to what your reader is receiving from you was a huge part of what John taught me. And then what is one piece of advice you would give to aspiring writers? That's very easy. Just write a lot, because the more you write, the more you get sick of your bad habits in writing. You start to recognize them. At first you just think, well, everything I write's pretty good, but then you realize, oh man, I completely overuse dashes. Oh man, I'm always saying in fact, comma, ... Or these phrases that once you really look at your writing and revision, you realize you rely on them instead of thinking. And so you look for a better way to do it. So read your work, write a lot and read your work and learn from yourself along with everyone else. And then I'll move on to Zayad, who asked, I assume you like to read a lot. What's your favorite genre? I do read a little bit of everything. I love nonfiction. I'm in the middle right now of All About the Story, which is a memoir of running the Washington Post by Len Downey, who was the editor when I was there. But I love, lately I've been just reading a lot of science fiction and good literary science fiction. If you've never read N.K. Jemisin, she's got a recent book out called The City We Became, and it's brilliant. None of this, nothing in N.K. Jemisin is going to make me a better writer of journalism, because her language is clear and incredibly fun to read. But but it still sort of recharges the battery to read really good stuff that's just a joy.
How do
And
you spell her name, John?
Jemisin, N.K. Jemisin. She did the Broken Earth trilogy, which was more classically science fiction, sort of fantasy, uh, some years ago. And she did 3 books in that series. It's a trilogy. And each of those books won a Hugo Award. So she was the first writer to ever win 3 Hugo Awards for all the parts of a trilogy. She's phenomenal.
Okay.
She's phenomenal. Um, I just, I don't just read science fiction, but science fiction is where I go to relax or to excite my imagination. John Scalzi is fun, laugh out loud funny, and I read a lot of him.
How do you spell his?
Scalzi. And he wrote a book called Red Shirts. He's written a lot of books, but Red Shirts takes the kind of Star Trek universe and asks, what if the people were real? And plays with the concepts a little bit. So, but if you look at my and I do almost all of the reading I do is almost all the reading I do is through audiobooks. It's just for part of it's a question of time, and part of it is a question of how terrible my attention span is these days. So I'm now looking through my Audible library, and the last 5 books I've read. Len Downey's All About the Story, Edward Ball's Slaves in the Family, where Edward Ball is a journalist and writer who went back through his family history and discovered that the family owned slaves, he knew that they were the owners of a big plantation, but the family history had always been, we treated our slaves well. And he goes through the history, and it's a real eye-opener about finding out the true history of his family, finding out the conditions of the people who live there, and finding his relatives who are black. Because that happened too. We all know it happened, but he had reunions with his black family members. So it's just a stunning book. I just read a Philip Roth book. I listened to an audiobook by T-Bone Burnett, a music producer, called The Confederacy, Truth and Reconciliation, which is all about systemic racism and oppression. Jane Smiley's 1,000 Acres. Been on a real tear of just sort of literary sort of fiction. The story of Edgar Sawtelle. 1,000 Acres and Edgar Sawtelle. 1,000 Acres is Jane Smiley. Edgar Sawtelle is David Roboleski. And 1,000 Acres is a retelling of King Lear on an Iowa farm. And the story of Edgar Sawtelle is the story of Hamlet with dogs, with a family that raises dogs. So anyway, I don't want to bore you with all the books I'm reading, but I read kind of eclectically, and one of the things that's happened since the virus hit is that I've gone from a morning run where I was generally running about 3 miles a day, and I upped it to 5 miles a day because I'm not on that commuter train. I've got more time. And so I'm listening to a lot more books a lot faster.
Wow. And, again, the point of you being here is for my students to hear something that can help them become a better writer. And I guess why, I started jotting down, how you spell things. I was going to go back and say, keep spelling words for me. I mean, I'm also recording this so students can go back, but just get them an idea of, how much reading you do, how much writing you do, but also just to remind them, although they were probably saying, wow, you read a lot, the books that you've read compared to the ones you want to read are like a teaspoon in the ocean, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And, you take it kind of one book at a time. Interestingly, I mean, just to keep on this topic, Tina Kelly came to the class right before this one. And one of the books that she mentioned was one where I said, John Schwartz said in answer to the question, which book do you wish you had written? And you answered Far from the Tree by Andrew Solomon. I don't know if you remember answering that.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, I mean, they're just, you're not boring us, believe me, but you could go on about, you know, your reading. And it's beautiful.
Well, you know, Far from the Tree is a life-changing book. It's just one of those books that changes the way you look at everything. So if you know, if you think about empathy, empathy you discover by reading Andrew Solomon is like a muscle, and if you exercise it, you really start to feel the lives of others more. And he takes you through all these differences between parents and children, whether it's parents with children who have dwarfism, or parents who have children who are schizophrenic, autistic, parents who have children who are deaf, and how they deal with those differences. It's a stunning book, and he spent years on it. Luckily for him, he's incredibly rich, so he can do whatever he wants. You know, he could take years because he's Andrew Solomon. Come on. Madison asked, what type of environment do you like to write in? And I will say that would be a good question in an alternate universe where I had choices. But I mean, the wonderful answer is, you know, in a perfect cafe where nobody bothers me and I get to sit with a cup of coffee and the coffee stays hot, you know, and life is good and nobody's playing bad jazz in the background. You know, the sort of background of coffee shops where it's just tinkle, 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 and it's just enough to distract you. Not the good jazz like you play, John. But you know, just the sort of a place where you could uninterruptedly do your work. But the fact is, nobody I know, and I've got friends who have got that. I've got a friend who has her writing chair in her apartment in New York, and it's a special chair, and she sits down to write there. Most of us don't have that kind of room. Most of us don't have those kind of choices. And as a journalist, especially, I have written stories on a laptop in the shotgun seat of a pickup truck while driving between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, or even in a helicopter making the same trip. I have in the days before I could carry a Wi-Fi unit with me, I would seek out hotel lobbies, and after some sort of public hearings, public meeting, and I'd rush over to some hotel lobby where they had Wi-Fi and sit on the uncomfortable couches and bang away until somebody told me to leave. I wrote, I have finished a story in a loud and crowded Wendy's, and I am right now sitting in a room that would be the dining room of my house if, when the virus hit, I hadn't had to take over a room. And so it's now got a desk in it. It's got, and I've got a nice view of my backyard and all the leaves I need to rake. But, you know, I mean, it's just, you don't get the choice. You write where you write. So, so there's that.
I guess the question, I think what she's maybe getting at too, though, was well, you already said your ideal world is the coffee shop. Never mind.
Yeah, exactly. The ideal world, but I guess my point is, if you need to write, you're going to write, and the place doesn't have to be perfect. Though, you know, wouldn't it be nice? And Madison also asked, have you ever had the stereotypical aha moment, like in the movies, where an idea strikes you, and you write on the napkin in a coffee shop? I keep a little reporter's notebook with me all the time. I've got one in the glove compartment of my car. I've got one at my desk, and even if I've got the laptop open, if it's an idea that I need to jump on, I'll write it down in the notebook. And so it's not necessarily the idea that I have to get hit with inspiration, what grabs me and I have to jump on right away most often is the structure of a story. If I've been working on a piece and have been trying to figure out how to tell it, the thing that tends to hit me in a burst is what that structure is going to be, and I jot down the outline really quickly that it's going to be this, and this, and it's very much like it's a moment like playing the old game of Tetris, where all the pieces have been coming down, and suddenly you know how to move them around to make everything fit. Zena asked, and I hope I pronounced your name right.
Nope, Xena.
Zena, all right. Zena asked, what made you switch from being a lawyer to being a journalist? I think I pointed out that, at the moment where I was trying to become both, actually where I was trying to become a lawyer and spending time as a journalist, I realized that I was more comfortable being a journalist than a writer. Being a journalist than a lawyer. And there was also, in that moment, an understanding that I might be a really good journalist. I might be good at it, but that I was not going to be anything all that special as a lawyer. That I knew lots of lawyers who were going to be much better than me, but I felt I might have a shot at being a pretty good writer. And so that helped me make my decision too. What am I going to be best at? Where am I going to, not to sound like a dope, but where am I going to have the best chance to shine? Now, I could have said instead, where am I going to have the best chance to make money? And been an okay lawyer and made a lot more money than I make, and I would have avoided a lot of the financial problems I've had as an adult. But I made my choice, and I love what I do. And so Zena asked, would you ever go back to being a lawyer? I've known a number of journalists who got law degrees as I did and went back to being a lawyer, decided to leave journalism and become a lawyer. And I haven't known one of them that didn't hate it, because we've got a pretty freewheeling life as journalists, and the parts of being a lawyer that they don't like really grate on them. It just, one guy in particular was when I was at Newsweek, said, I'm going to go off, I'm going to go back, I'm going to be a lawyer. And he was back writing again within a year. He just couldn't stand it. I don't know what he couldn't stand about it, but it didn't fit. Faraz asks, what tools do you use to fact check your sources? I've always got multiple windows open. I'm always checking for the best information. And that starts with Google, and it can even start with Wikipedia, but it doesn't end with Wikipedia. I check the names of my sources. I check the spelling and their titles by going to their, if they're academics, by going to their academic websites. I check the names of the organizations that they're affiliated with. I just go back through as I'm finishing my piece, and I highlight every noun, and I go online to try to prove that that's either true or not. That I try to do more to find those to make sure I haven't messed this up. More than that, I spend a lot of time when I finished a story going back to the people I talked to, and I go back to those people I talked to, and I say, I'm going to do a quick fact check with you. It's going to take about 20 minutes, and then I talk to them about what I've said in the story. I don't send them the text of the story beforehand, because that's against our rules. But I just make sure that I sort of talk me through the story, so they know every noun. They know everything I'm saying, and I even talk to them about their quotes often, because especially when you're talking about scientific stuff, this isn't a game of gotcha. I'm not trying to catch somebody saying something inconvenient. I need them to say it in the most accurate possible way. So So that's that's what I'm going for there. And
Can
then,
John, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they read Learning How to Learn, which was your article about the Oakleys, Barbara Oakley,
mhm.
and I said similar to the article they read by Dan Barry, where he was William Vincer's part. As a reporter, you went there and you observed, and I'm sure you fact checked afterwards too, but a lot of it was just what you saw with your own eyes, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's a huge part of it, and that's a big part of what's wrong with reporting during the coronavirus is that I've only done one trip for a story since March, and that was when I went to meet Dr. Ramo. I sat with her outside at Lamont Doherty, but not being able to be there and catch those details, not noticing that the basement smells of cat urine. I think the stories are, I mean, I know that sounds like a stupid detail, but the stories are poorer without that kind of first person experience, the knowing what I've seen. The fact is that when I went to write about wind turbines in West Texas, I climbed a 300-foot tower to step out on top of a wind turbine and to see the view because I wanted to know what it was like to do that so that I could write about it. Because one of the guys I was talking to for the story said that he was scared of heights, but he climbed up to the top of one of those the first time when he was applying for the job. And he got to the top and opened the hatch and looked out and he said, "This is my career." And I thought, what could be so great about that moment? Is he just feeding me a line? And I climbed the tower. It was very scary for me. I'm not great with heights. And it was very strenuous, and I'm not in terrible shape, but I don't have great upper body strength, and you're climbing a ladder which uses your arms. And the whole thing was just really taxing. And I got to the top, and you're in this tiny little room, the nacelle, and then you push open the hatch and you step out and you tie your guideline to a rail so that you don't fall off and fall 300 feet and die. And then you look out and it's magnificent. I mean, you are on this flat surface, 300 feet up, seeing the whole world around you, and the wind is blowing, and it feels amazing. And and so in the story, and then in the story about the story, I was able to get across that sense of wonder of, popping that hatch and seeing the world, feeling confined, feeling the sort of dark, endless climb, and then being out in the complete open world. And it was, and so I was able to convey both that feeling of being out there, but also just how the climb makes your forearms feel that they're on fire, and your legs are, you think they're going to cramp up. And I was soaked in sweat. And all that experience was valuable. All of that fed the story. So if you can't get out and do that, you're not doing the best writing you're capable of. It's that those are the facts, as you're saying, John. Those are facts you see yourself. It's not just checking the sites in a paper or something.
Yeah, and actually, just to kind of build on that concept of experiencing something. I mean, I advocate when my students read, not to read as they're taught in school, to read for the main idea, what's going to be on the test, but as the great philosopher SpongeBob SquarePants put it, you have to use your imagination. I mean, and writers like you and other writers that can put you in the scene, like you do in the opening paragraph of the story about the Oakleys, can, if you as readers, because I'm trying to get my students to love reading. And school, John Holt wrote an essay, How Teachers Make Children Hate Reading. It's a great essay. Is going to be on the test. Would you agree that writing, what you try to do is put the reader into the scene so they can be there with you?
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. So, Lena asks, what is your biggest goal as a writer? And I don't have a huge goal, but I guess the main goal I have is to connect with readers and to help them understand whatever it is that I'm trying to get across to them. That to be heard, to be understood is really what I'm going for. And so, I mean, it's pretty simple, but that's it. And then I've got Joss asking, can you still write a good paper or article when writing about a topic that doesn't much interest you? Does that mean you're less proud of the work? And I think that you end up with a lot of times with something that might not seem inspiring. And my advice in those times is sometimes you just got to grind it out. That it might not be, it might be something that is, as I like to say, dull but important, and so you put it out there. Or it might be that you're assigned something that, the sort of Food and Drug Administration review hearing that doesn't have much going on, but is still newsworthy, like I used to do 30 years ago at the Washington Post. But the point is, I almost always find something that fascinates me when I'm writing a story. There's almost always some detail or something I'm trying to do that that interests me, and sometimes even can delight me. So to me, it's always work. And first of all, you don't do the work, you get fired. So that then you lose your house and you starve. So that's pretty good incentive anyway. But on top of that, once you start doing research, there's almost always something that's going to interest you. And Joss also asks any tips on how to improve someone's writing. Again, write a lot, but also read your work aloud to yourself. See how it sounds to you when you say it aloud. That's a simple trick, and it does a lot. Rose asks, says sometimes I have a hard time getting myself to write essays. How do you motivate yourself when you have to write about a topic you don't really want to write about? This gets back to that idea of losing my job and starving and losing my house. But also, we all have moments when our energy is low, but we're not super motivated. I had a friend, a journalist named David Carr, who would get into a real feeling of a slump, and he just wasn't feeling it. Wasn't excited about work. Wasn't excited about, he would just sort of get into a feeling of a slump. And what I would say to him is, you need a story. The moment you've got something to write about, you're going to get excited again. And sure enough, he would start working on something, get excited, love life. It would just, and David and I called this story therapy. That the actual process of researching and writing and reporting was enough to get us motivated. And Rose also asked, how long does it take me to write something? And the answer is there's no answer. That I have pieces. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who said that there was a story coming up that I've been talking to him about for 3 years. I haven't started writing it yet, but my work on the story started 3 years ago when I first started asking about a certain lawsuit, and they're finally moving toward the kind of legal filings that would make it worth my writing about it. On the other hand, I sometimes hear about a decision in a case or a breaking news story that happens at 9 o'clock at night, and I've got until 10 o'clock to finish the story. I've written stories, whole stories for the paper in 45 minutes or an hour. I get the first versions of stories up in 30 minutes sometimes if it's a newsworthy story now, and we know that we want to have something online right away. I'll bang out the first 300 words in 20 minutes, and we'll get that up, and then I'll go back and start working through the rest of the day. So there's the wonderful thing about newspaper writing is there's room for you to do that kind of quick work and also the slow work too. I mean, it's one of the things I like about the Times. Andrew asks, what is the best way to begin a piece of writing? And there are a million ways to do it. The main thing in a work of journalism is to get the reader's attention. That might be through an anecdote. something that happened to somebody that illustrates what you're talking about. But often it should be just what one of the old editors at the Washington Post, Bob Kaiser, called one simple straight shot at the facts, just stating as cleanly and concisely as possible, this is what I'm going to be writing about. This is what you will be hearing. Andrew also asked, do you believe in writer's block? And the answer is, there are lots of reasons that you might have trouble getting motivated to write, but they're all solvable, it seems to me. Unless you've got a serious, executive function problem, unless there's something else going on. Sometimes the thing that you're thinking of as writer's block is not knowing how to start. And the answer there can often be that you don't start at the beginning. You don't try to figure out how to start the piece, but you know something in the middle. You know you're ready to start writing that. And so you just start somewhere and work your way around. Another way to deal with it is just to write badly, to start out and not care so much about getting it perfect, but to start banging out mediocre sentences that you can improve later, because you sort of know what you're trying to say. You sort of have an idea of where you need to go with it. So I'm a big fan of writing badly, because it gets you started. It gets your basic ideas down. Maeva asks, how can I overcome overwriting? And my answer there is to revise. Once again, you're going to write your first draft. Might not be the best thing you want, but by going back over it, you can really slim it down and get rid of the overly flowery stuff and put in something that's attention getting. Maeva also asked how to avoid unclear writing, and I think the answer there is to think of your audience. Either have just the sort of vague person in your head. I always, when I was starting in journalism especially, I would think of a particular person. The person I most often settled on as the person I was writing the story for was my mother, because I was writing complex, very often complex science stories, medical stories, administrative stories about the Food and Drug Administration at the Washington Post, and then technology stories at the Times. And my mother is a perfect reader for those stories to aim for, because she's super smart, but she never tried to learn any of this stuff. So I want somebody who is intelligent and curious enough to want to read a story, but you don't just show up in the middle and start using all the jargon that the people that you're writing about use. You try to make it engaging so that your intelligent reader can jump into it. So that's what's so great about my using my mom, is that I knew that if I was writing it, if I was explaining it to her in a conversation, this is how I would do it. And then I could write from that, because a lot of writing is figuring out how you would explain it to somebody else, how you would say it. In fact, one of my early tricks was to listen to myself as I was explaining to people what I was trying to do with a story, because even before I had a structure in my head, I was able to describe the story to people in a few words, and I would have to stop myself and say, excuse me for a second, and I'd write down what I had just told them, and that would often be the sort of crucial sentence, the sentence that tells you where you're going in the piece. And then Engel says, how did you improve and enhance your vocabulary skills? And part of that is just always reading. That's, the sort of reading I do is about finding those words, seeing, especially in journalism, what are the ways that other journalists use to describe a difficult topic. It's not just the language, but it's the imagery that drives you to find better images. As one of the great science writers of our time is a guy named Boyce Rensberger, who I was with at the Washington Post. And Boyce talked about the muscle cells that have a sort of grabbing mechanism and a knob along a line, and that when muscles contract, the grabbing mechanism is moving along this line of knobs, and so the muscle pulls together. And he described it as a group of rowers in a boat moving their way along a dock by each of them grabbing and pulling, grabbing and pulling. And I could see it. I don't do competitive rowing. I've never done anything like that, but I could sure see those rowers grabbing the dock with their arms in motion and coordinated and getting and moving forward that way. So you look for.
Yeah, so I sorry to interrupt. First of all, why would you know that Engel pronounces her name Angel? You wouldn't, right?
Angel, I'm sorry.
No. But the point being that we're all using, our knowledge of how to pronounce things and how to see the world, and then we're depending on people, in this case me, to correct you. And your response, rather than being sorry, you can thank me for saying that.
Well, what I would thank you for is sending me a pronouncer guide when you send me these folks' questions, so I don't embarrass myself.
I know. Sorry, I'm a little busy. But here's the other thing I wanted to bring up, since they read an article by a person I'm sure you've heard of named Jerry Spence, the lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote an essay that they read called Lessons from Lawyers. And he said he's always trying to tell a story and create mind pictures, which is exactly what you just described.
Yeah,
so just kind of reaffirming.
It's really important. It's really important to give people something that they can almost actually see in their mind's eye.
Yeah, he actually called it a mind movie. I misquoted him. A mind movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry. Continue, John. I'm sorry.
Well, I've worked my way through the questions. Does anybody have any other questions for me?
I have plenty, but.
How much time have we got left?
Well, we have about 15 minutes. Could you talk a little bit about, since they've read Dan Barry, and I'm going to go get Phyllis to come say hello. Tell us about Dan Barry. They read his article, A Writing Coach Becomes a Listener. What do you find strong about his writing, for instance? Because I'm advocating they read more of his stuff. I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, Dan is a writer of incredible empathy. He feels everything he writes about, and he wants you to sort of feel what he's feeling, whether that's affection or outrage, and I find his stuff amazing. If you go back through some of his big projects, like Jane Ponytail about a woman's death in Queens, or his work on the lives of mentally challenged men in a. Hey, Phyllis.
Hey, how are you, John?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a long time, other than on Zoom sessions, right?
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt your day. I'm sure they've got you busy.
Well, I'm watching the Times' town meeting.
Oh, and I'm doing this instead, so you're going to have to fill me in.
Yes, I will. Anyway, welcome to all of you in class, too. I'm sure you're being very helpful to them, John.
Well, I hope so. You need to tell me one thing, which they would have said already, and then you can get back to the meeting, which is, did they say anything about buyouts?
No, not yet.
Okay.
This is, yes. Okay, go back to your town meeting. Yeah, so, this is like playing jazz, but yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt about Dan Barry, but that's a good segue. After you get done talking about Dan Barry, it would be great to talk about the importance of editors, another voice, but continue.
Okay.
I interrupt your Dan Barry.
Well, it's just that Dan talked about these mentally challenged men who were living in a bunkhouse under terrible, inhumane conditions in Iowa, and they're the boys in the bunkhouse. And it is just a book of tremendous heart and outrage. And Dan doesn't say you should feel this way. Dan simply conveys it to you, and by the time you're done with the book, you're seething with outrage and a sense of loss for these men who are treated so badly over so much time, and also admiration for the people who decided that they were going to fix this problem, that they were going to break these guys out of what really was a form of slavery. And Dan has stuck with these men and written about them, and it's just it's amazing journalism. And I, and so, I mean, I remember talking to him about that story on a long drive from Oklahoma City to Dallas, where we had been together in Oklahoma City to write about the Moore tornado, the tornado that hit Oklahoma City and Moore, Oklahoma, several years ago. And on the way down to Dallas, where we were able to get our flight because flights out of Oklahoma City were still messed up, we ended up having, and also our rental car was in Dallas. He just talked out what was happening with this place, and I just knew, as I always know with Dan stuff, that it was going to be potentially life-changing work to read. And so, what was your next question, John?
Well, I changed my next question back to could you talk to my students about the process of writing Oddly Normal?
Yeah, I mean, we went through the experiences that y'all have read about in the book, and there was a moment when a friend of mine at work, I was telling him about everything, and he said, "Well, this is a book. You need to write this as a book because it could help families that are dealing with some of these issues." And so, first of all, I went to Joe and sought his permission to write it up, since it's very personal, and he told me that I could, and then Jean, my wife, sat down and wrote out her memories of what happened, and she wrote thousands and thousands of words of her memories of what happened, how they happened, when they happened. And then I went back too, and I collected all of the emails between me and the various people that I was dealing with over those times, the various teachers, the principal. And I keep, unlike a lot of people, I keep emails going back 30 years. Well, not 30 years now, but I keep emails going back nearly 20 years, and I keep phone logs and stuff like that going back more than 30 years. So I can find notes from phone conversations I had in 1997 or 2003, which is a nice thing to have. And there's a lot of paper and everything else. So I gathered all that together and then started to write. One of the things about writing books when you're working full time is you have to make time to do it. So I did a lot of my writing late night and on weekends.
And also, I mean, one of the things about the book, which they haven't read yet, and I said my 102 class, I think I'm going to be using it again. So look for a spike on Amazon, people buying your book. But your book is written kind of interspersing one chapter of your personal experience and then with the kind of larger issues of people facing.
That's right.
That. So you figured out that structure. Can you explain how you came to that?
Well, sure. I mean, the fact is, one family's experiences by itself doesn't really illuminate much. I mean, it might be an interesting story for people, but it doesn't tell you much of what you need to know. It seemed to me there were all these other issues that our story touched on, and I did research to provide that information too, on psychology and how the psychiatric community has changed its views on homosexuality over the decades, and how terrible they used to be, and how they've sort of worked toward a better understanding. And but also there's legal background and psychological background. There's legal background to things like same-sex marriage and gay rights, LGBT rights in the U.S. And I was national legal correspondent for the Times. I'd been covering the evolution of things like Proposition 8 in California and the lawsuits for marriage equality. And so writing that up became an important part of the book as well. It just seemed to me that if I just wrote essays about those issues, it wouldn't be a fascinating book. It might be worthy. And if I just wrote about our lives, it wouldn't take people anywhere except into our house. And so by combining the two, I was trying to do a book that people could actually learn from. I used the comparison to a Reese's peanut butter cup. That, part of it, I was mixing the chocolate and the peanut butter and coming up with something that's better.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then, speaking about being a legal correspondent, we looked at your brief account of Kamala Harris's questioning of Amy Coney Barrett, now Supreme Court Justice, on global warming, climate change, where she said it's controversial. And what I was pointing out about that story was it was very, first of all, it was very concise and very informative, but there was no opinion in that at all. You simply reported, here's what Kamala Harris said, here was the answer, and then to support the idea that global warming, in fact, is not controversial, you quoted an expert. I can't remember who it was, but is it difficult? That's a dumb question. It's probably very natural for you at this point to keep your opinion out of certain kind of writing and simply report?
Well, I don't write without opinion. I write without expressing my opinion directly in the stories. The shape of a story, the people you decide to quote, the stories have a point of view. But if I just go out there and say, I'm John Schwartz and I say this, why should anyone accept my authority just because I have an opinion? Everybody's got opinions. It is the substantiation of what I'm trying to say through the work of scientific reports and experts and people who speak movingly on these topics that make the difference. And so there's a criticism from journalism professors of what they call the view from nowhere, which is saying that both sides have opinions, that both opinions are equally valid. But when it comes to something like climate change, it's not about opinions. We have the science that shows
Right.
that if this is happening, that humans are by far, in a way, the greater cause. Human activities are, and so I don't have to simply quote the other side, which is an old model of journalism that is falling by the wayside. If there's a genuine conflict, like what are we supposed to do about climate change? What's the best way to fix it? Then you talk about the various opinions there. But in being a journalist and not an activist, I'm trying to structure things in a way that gives people the information they need to make up their own minds, but not in a way that just says there is no answer here. So if Amy Coney Barrett says that climate change is controversial, it's a controversial topic, I'm able to find people who point out that no, that's simply not the case anymore. It might have been the case some years ago, but it's not the case now. And so what I'm trying to do there is to give people a path toward an answer, but not to just, it's not about me. It's not about my opinion. It's about taking the information that others can provide and showing that path to the right answer or the best answer. Somebody could still read it and say, okay, but what Amy Coney Barrett thinks about climate change isn't relevant since she's going to be ruling on the law. And then you find somebody who makes the point that, no, this actually has a lot to do with how you rule as well. Judges don't live in a vacuum. So, you can extend these as far as you want. So I don't know if I answered that well.
Yeah, no, what I'm part of the course description is to teach people to become stronger critical thinkers. And what I advocate is get as much information as you can and then decide what appeals to your common sense. And being bombarded with information is very daunting for my students. And, you know, in class the other day, a student said, well, you know, we don't hear anything anymore in the media about the coronavirus. And I kind of did a double take and said, well, what's the media you're talking about? And it turns out, of course, it's Instagram, Twitter, my, you know, tunnel vision. So I went on NJ.com and I said, here's Governor Murphy putting out the statistics. So, you know, for you, I mean, could you, like, we're almost out of time, but can you talk about how maybe hard it is, but how important it is to try to get accurate information and where to look for it?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of news organizations. The New York Times, the main lead story in the New York Times today, at the upper right corner of the front page, is the coronavirus and the fact that that infections are rising to record levels. And the Times has a staff of people who are working through vast amounts of news every day, and editors are making judgments about what's the most important thing to put out there. And the website just makes it all available. And as students, I think you've got access to free subscriptions.
I don't think so.
I would check on that.
Okay. Yeah, because what I end up having to do is I copy them into documents because they hit paywalls all the time. So anyway, but they might maybe, but that's we'll figure that out. But yeah.
The New York Times, oh, it's free for high school students. I wonder about
Right.
college students.
Yeah, I probably not. But anyway,
A
John.
lot of college libraries offer it, but yeah, it's discounted. Well, I don't know. I would look into that in any case. But a lot of libraries, like my local library, offers access, I believe, and I can get it from home. But of course, I pay for mine.
Yeah. Anyway,
Anything?
we're out of time. They have to go, but it's been amazing for you to come here. Thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure talking to y'all. I hope I wasn't boring.
No, you weren't.
No, you
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
You weren't.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Have
Take
a
care.
good rest of your day. Bye.
Okay, y'all take care. Bye
Thank
now.
you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care, John. Thank you very much.
Bye, Professor.
Right. Bye.
Bye. See you guys.